Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thought this would be a good little mega project for me to come back on. This took honestly forever to set up, and as you can see, I also have a new mic finally. But yeah, from the title of the video, you can see that I have seen 31 horror movies this October. But funny enough, if I put in more effort in the beginning of the month, I could have watched around 50 horror movies. But in all cases, enjoy, because I'll be reviewing each and every one of these horror movies. The first watch is My Bloody Valentine. A quick, easy late night horror watch, and so far for an 80s slasher horror movie with this short of a runtime, it's honestly boring. The characters are forgettable, the kills are lame, and the story is just okay. I had wanted to watch this since 2022 and it turned out pretty disappointing. There's an overwhelming amount of potential that this film had. With its aesthetics and the setting of the film, they could have done plenty of cool shit and utilized a lot of really cool aspects as well. Plus, this movie being made in the 80s, which is quite of a golden era for the slasher horror movie genre, quite of a missed opportunity. Overall, this was dumb and unrealistic and just boring. The cherry on top is its bad acting and bad line deliveries as well. Also, the plot twist at the end was a slight mix of predictable and unpredictable. I don't even know how to explain that perfectly, but just watch the movie if you care. I don't recommend it though on my behalf. Regardless, it was still badly executed, as were most of the other aspects in this film. My overall rating is a 4.5 out of 10. Second movie of October, Nosferatu the Vampire. Werner Herzog continues to be one of the most legendary people in Hollywood and simply is flat out the most interesting filmmaker slash documentarian. Now with this film, there is a weird balance within the dialogue of it being so strong at times, yet at the same time is sort of weak and doesn't have too much dialogue and sometimes lingers more so on its beautifully shot cinematography and scenery. I don't know what to say. I mean, I expected more. Yes, it is Werner and it is his style for most of the time, but this didn't feel like it had the quality nor the impact it could have reached. It definitely had massive potential. Klaus Kinski is perfect and might be the second best Nosferatu in my opinion. He's naturally creepy and eerie. He also acts alongside Isabella Adjani, who is honestly incredible in everything that she's in and was pretty good here as well. However, Bruno Ganz as Jonathan Harker does feel a little miscast. I think I like Keanu Reeves' version a lot more. Klaus Kinski is perfect as I mentioned, but when you hear that someone like him, who had been in films like Fitzcarraldo, another Herzog film, which I absolutely love, especially way more than this one, to play someone like Count Dracula in a Nosferatu adaptation slash remake, you'd expect Klaus's performance to be more rewarding and powerful and applaud-worthy. So what sucks is, in my opinion, it wasn't. And that is simply another reason as to why this film does have quite a few missed potentials at play. It is a little bit of a low bar to say this, but this is undoubtedly a lot better than the original Nosferatu film. Storytelling-wise, for a film that came out before Coppola's version, there was some cool fleshed out storytelling and world building that worked for its time. I also got to say that the Renfield in this adaptation has generally got to be the most insane version out of all of the adaptations that I had seen. Don't expect anything too crazy because it's somewhat subtle and he knows how to get under your skin and he can be real annoying. Overall, the Werner Herzog film is a Werner Herzog film. Plus, this is another Nosferatu film as well. So all in all, I don't feel like my time got entirely wasted. There is still a lot of good aspects in this film, but one thing I will say as well is this movie could have definitely been 5 to 10 minutes shorter. Shout out and honorable mention to that soundtrack though. If you want to talk about powerful, that soundtrack can hit hard. My overall rating is a 7 out of 10. Okay, this one I had wanted to watch this for quite a while and I enjoyed almost every bit of it. And that is The Toxic Avenger. This is a little bit of a sneak entry because this is mostly like a horror comedy-esque type of movie, but I'm still gonna put it either way because I really liked it. This is sickening, absurd, and disgusting, all for the right and most batshit crazy reasons. This was released in 1984 and it has the gore equivalent of your average 80s horror movie, but cranked up to an 11. And instead, this is an original anti-superhero action film horror comedy. This is some real gruesome stuff, man. They do not hold back. This was also a little bit of a random watch, but I did always wanted to get into some trauma movies, and I got to say this was a good start, and it was honestly down right in my alley. It's also honestly hard to describe the style of this movie, because it's unlike anything you've ever seen before, and some of its style could be seen as bad, yet that's just all intentional, and all part of its silliness. Overall, it's pretty iconic, and it's an easy watch. And huge beware is also very, very insane if I haven't mentioned that enough. And besides that, I also got to say, huge Huge props to the makeup and effects. Top notch all around in that department. My overall rating is a 7.8 out of 10. I will say one last thing about this movie. It is also very annoying how hard it is to find this movie online. So if you want to watch this movie, I just suggest getting the physical media copy of it. Because either way, physical media is king. Now on to the next film. Willy's Wonderland. The real and proper Five Nights at Freddy's movie. I gotta say I feel real mixed on this. I cut so much slack for films because I understand how difficult filmmaking can be, especially for a feature film. And this was a horror feature film with a mid-budget. And I guess they found another way to cut down their budget massively by making Nicolas Cage not talk at all. But other than that, it does reach to a point where some moments are too bad and questionable. But let's talk about the good first and what I enjoyed. Firstly, yes, I will go down the easy and lazy route, but it's still the correct take nonetheless, and say that this is the best Five Nights at Freddy's live action adaptation, which isn't even a Five Nights at Freddy's movie. And Nicolas Cage, even when he's a silent loner type of character, which was an odd choice, he was still extremely badass. He kicks absolute animatronic ass and blood and guts all in this film. This is surprisingly one of the best action that I had ever seen in a horror film, especially for something as bad and as mixed as this film. This was still really metal and badass. It even had some decent storytelling and plot twists here and there. Now on to the bad. I did not give a single shit about the Liv storyline or any of her friends at all. I truly believe this movie could have worked out perfectly fine and the same without that subplot shoehorned in. I also hate shitting on actors' performances, and you can tell it's become quite of a cheap budget movie when almost the entire cast besides Nicolas Cage, who never even talks, are all bad actors with unbearable line deliveries. Emily Tosta as Liv is genuinely one of the worst performances I had ever seen in my life. All she knows how to do is be a bad actor and do this face for 90% of the movie. And that's it. What makes it worse is another topic that I haven't even begun to tackle, which is the writing. At its core, it is decent and works. But when you're watching and see some of the character decisions or writing decisions play out, hell, even some of the dialogue, you really start to think if you can make a better movie. Did they really just tape a huge sign to the back of a bus and say if you want to come act for $100, come right in, come right in? I know with how much I said about the negatives of the movie, it does seem like I really hate the movie. I enjoyed it and felt mixed enough to know this is a one-time watch. Overall, it is worth the watch if you're a fan of the Five Nights at Freddy's games, especially if you're a fan of the FNAF franchise and you're disappointed by the live-action adaptation and you want to see a proper Five Nights at Freddy's movie, watch Willy's Wonderland. But if you're a general horror fan, this is an okay watch with some badass moments here and there, and it's not a high priority watch nonetheless. Still pretty fun and badass. My overall rating is a 4.5 out of 10. Now this one is really good. The original Wicker Man. Simple, mysterious plot to begin with. A police sergeant named Howie travels to a Scottish island to investigate the disappearance of one missing young girl. But what he uncovers is something much darker than you could have imagined. This really works for what it is. This is basically the original Midsommar. It is definitely a classic in my books. And I watched this on Apple TV and it had the 4K restoration, and I got to say they did a fantastic job with the 4K restoration. This is not a jump scare horror or a slasher horror or anything like that. This is just a cult horror movie. It genuinely scared me from within, just imagining being put in that scenario and situation, especially with that sad, heartbreaking ending, which is such a well done way to pay off the film and really show it off of how it is a horror movie. Really terrifying stuff, man. Great writing and great performances, and even greater execution with its story and storytelling. I was literally intrigued all the way through and my eyes were glued to the screen non-stop. I almost didn't want it to end. I could have even used one more hour of the movie, and the movie was already 1 hour and 34 minutes long, which is even the final cut, which is the version that I watched and loved. Another awesome shout out to that soundtrack. The soundtrack is really what makes this film so different from other horror films and elevates the unique beauty and jolly of it from within. Paul Giovanni is amazing. The Corn Rig song was happily stuck in my head and still is ever since I watched the movie. What a lovely song, man. Corn rigs and barley rigs and corn rigs are funny. Just showing off my little singing skills. I was surprised to find out it was an original song made for the movie. It was so good that I even added it to my own playlist of songs that I like. Overall, honestly amazing. I applaud and I recommend. My overall rating is an 8.5 out of 10. Now on to an even darker movie, 2015's The Witch. This is darkly grim and horrific and depressing. Yummy. That is just how I like my Robert Eggers horror movies. This film had my attention for the first time I ever heard of it for the dumbest reason. Mostly because of the font of how the W is spelled in the poster. I always read it in my head pronounced as the Witch and not The Witch, because it does look like double V's instead of just a W. That is such a weird detail, but that's why I always knew about the movie. Besides that, I love me some good folklore horror, especially when Robert Eggers is the director. Has he always had the sauce? Do I need to rewatch a few of his movies? Because god damn! I assume this is the average experience of being a teenage girl in the folklore times. If this was a Letterboxd review, that would have been my funny one-liner Letterboxd review. This is short, well-paced, with high, well-kept tension throughout. What a haunting, intense watch and experience. Very well portrayed storytelling-wise in showing how the devil and witches works in mysterious and scary ways, and was able to groom that poor girl. The amount of performance here that killed it are literally through the roof. I believe this is Anya Taylor-Joy's all-timer best performance, alongside Ralph Ineson, who is honestly such a goldmine of an underrated actor. He is naturally talented and can become so powerful at the drop of a hat. Kate Dickie was also nothing short of excellent. Overall, a genuinely scary and well-made folklore horror film, and honorable mention to that cinematography because geez, they put some good care and effort into that too. Round of applause all around. Good watch, so creepy and so scary and very unsettling as well, and it definitely succeeded at what it tried to do. My overall rating is a 9 out of 10. This is also a very high rating of another horror movie, and this is Mother. Another edition of white people be crazy as hell. This has to be female's version of Eraserhead. I'm not even comparing the quality wise or anything, but just the way it tackles the subjects. I was honestly extremely surprised finding out that people actually don't like this. I guess this is another one of those films which I like more than other people. This movie makes me viscerally mad at times, but I think that's what it was trying to do, and it succeeded. It was a cherry on top to an already very anxiety-inducing, nightmarish horror film on motherhood. This is absolutely stressful and insane, and it definitely worked for me. The things that did take me a little bit out of the experience was the usage of CGI in a few parts. I do feel quite iffy on that, but it does make sense at the end of the day storytelling wise. I absolutely had no idea it would have gone this insane and not hold back also. It's pretty saddening and has got a lot of high tensions and good suspense before all hell broke loose. It's unpredictable and has a real crazy ending that tops it off and makes it all the more shocking. This film is about relationship and motherhood. It's extremely intense and just extreme in general. It starts off a little bit slow, but when it really kicks off, it goes full throttle, and it'll even make you hold your breath out of how intense it can be at times, and with all of the high rising tension. Javier Bardem is great in here, but he has had better performances. Jennifer Lawrence, I apologize, I was not familiar with your game. I honestly did not know that she had it in her to pull off this type of performance, but this is her best performance in my opinion, and it was excellent. Overall, this is a horror movie I would watch again with friends or family who had never seen it before because it's that fun of a crazy watch. It's so intense and so stressful. Honestly, incredible stuff. What a heavy film. My overall rating is a 9 out of 10. Now this is directed by Kevin Smith, a good buddy of mine, and that is 2011's Red State. It is never surprising to see an insane cast in a Kevin Smith movie. This is the second horror film that I had seen of Kevin Smith, and this is like a mixture of horror and thriller. To give you an example, his other horror movie that I had seen was Tusk, and that was some crazy shit. Red State follows a trio group of young teen boys who are led to believe they're going to gangbang an older lady, but it was just a ruse set up by her and her extremist terrorist evangelical family who are too stubborn and take stuff to extreme lengths to try to preach and teach Christianity. Really insane stuff that honestly happens here. Well written dialogue wise, which is not that surprising if you know that Kevin Smith is a very good writer, and there are some good directing skills here and there as well. Quite better than a few of other Kevin Smith movies honestly. And overall it's a decent horror thriller flick, and it had me hooked. I still think Kevin Smith is very talented in this genre, and I would like to see him revisit this type of genre once again. I honestly believe that one thing that would have made the movie so much better is if they went with the original ending of the film.
What was supposed to happen was boom, his head explodes, and boom, his chest explodes, his heart, all over John Goodman, who's just shocked by the whole thing. And then one by one, you start seeing members of the flock blowing, their heads blown up one by one, their chests exploding. Everyone's looking around. The ATF guys, who you think, all right, they're the good guys. Their heads start exploding, their chests start exploding. It's erratic, it's everywhere. One by one, good guys and quote unquote bad guys. And then the John Goodman character who can't understand it, he holds his head, drops to the ground, closes his eyes. All we hear is cacophony and noise, and then it just stops. And so then we were in darkness, and then we'd go to POV. So, basically we'd let in some light, and then we were going to cut to John Goodman, kind of finally looking up and opening his eyes. Everyone else is dead and headless with their chests explode. And he looks over to the left, and there's a gigantic angel, 10-foot angel wearing full armor with a giant sword, and he's got the last member of the church on the sword, and he pulls it out. So you realize their heads exploding, their chests were angels just slaughtering everybody. So he drops the last 5-pointer, that's the name of the church, on the ground, and the angel looks at John Goodman and goes, shh. And then the angel takes off, gigantic wings, man. We thought about going to Ben Affleck. He was in Dogma, did the same thing with the wings. Couldn't get him, he's Batman now. So, and anyway, the angel would take off, and then as he banked right into the sky, like John Goodman was meant to watch him go, all of a sudden you see the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse ride across the sky, giant as life. Credits.
Overall, 6.5 out of 10. Quick shameless plug. A year ago this month, I actually did interview Kevin Smith, and you can check it out on my YouTube channel on Mojito with Mojito. Now I'm gonna be talking about Jeepers Creepers. I goddamn hate Victor Salva. Obviously, if you care enough to research about how bad of a guy that the director is, do your research. But yeah, as terrible as the director is, I did watch the movie regardless because I know this is an iconic horror movie and whatnot, and I liked it at the end of the day. But goddamn, that guy sucks. And that is truly an understatement. Now that I got that out of the way, I wasn't too keen on starting the Jeepers Creepers franchise, mostly because of Victor Salva, but also because of Jeepers Creepers Reborn, which is the first Jeepers Creepers movie that I had seen in 2022, which is kind of like a legacy sequel slash reboot or something like that. And I think that movie was so terrible, it destroyed my perception of the whole franchise, and I think I just stayed away from the franchise for so long. Anyways, it's 2025 and it was Halloween, so I thought why not finally start the original Jeepers Creepers. I do feel sort of mixed on it. It is an interesting idea with good writing in certain aspects, and the brother-sister chemistry worked well and felt unique. This did feel genuinely intense and the whole atmosphere is scary. And imagining yourself into these situations, like man, I would not survive at all. This is one horror movie franchise I genuinely believe that I would not survive. But maybe what I would have done is if the first time the Jeepers Creepers creature is chasing me down the street, I would have just after I strayed away from him, I would have just turned back and found another route back to the original city I was in. But that's just how I would have probably survived, I guess. Comment down below, how would you have survived the Jeepers Creepers creature? Other than that, this did feel kind of different from other horror icons and franchises. I mean, first big factor for the first movie, the villain literally won at the end, and no celebratory ending occurred where they all we beat you, and then they all just beat the big creature at the end and all that jazz. Besides that, there was also not any overflow of characters going around, as well as overdone ideas. This was a decently made original horror movie with some slight cliches here and there. This was interesting and intriguing, and I did like how the creeper had his own style and his own signature vehicle. It's a roaring shit vehicle, but he makes it so menacing and real terrifying too. You don't really see slasher killers like that have such roaring terrifying vehicles like that, especially with that plate number he had, beating you. So iconic. Overall, it's kinda cool and interesting for the most part, and it is pretty out of the ordinary as well, and all in all it's quite horrifying. My overall rating is a 6 out of 10. The best ways to describe it is the first half is an excellent, terrific ride and is genuinely good, but it 100% loses itself in the second half, even though the ending made sense at least. On to the next film. This is another horror film that I wanted to watch for quite a while, and that is Scanners. It's not a masterpiece and not too terrible, it's just quite solid and enjoyable. This reminds me a lot of Brian De Palma's The Fury. Some ideas are very similar, and it even copied some of its practical effects as well. This is probably just Cronenberg's version of The Fury. Now, although I prefer The Fury and it is far more entertaining, Scanners has got so much great and casual Cronenberg weirdness to it that it's hard not to enjoy or find interesting. The pacing could be better, but I do remember reading some Letterboxd reviews of this film back in the day, and people were exaggerating, saying it was super boring and nothing happens. And all I have to say after watching that film is, did we even watch the same movie? Are you kidding me? This is peak unique Cronenberg horror in the form of sci-fi and thriller. I mean, also sure, if the film did have more of what the film had in the final act, it definitely would have been more fun and entertaining, but I'm still pleased with what we got. Overall, it's a weird and Cronenberg-y blend of body horror and sci-fi, and it is honestly kind of underrated even in this day and age. My overall rating is an 8 out of 10. Mostly worth the watch if you're already a fan of David Cronenberg, but if you have not seen his other movies, go watch his other stuff and then watch Scanners. This other watch is weirder than usual, and that is 1980s Maniac. What a weird little very gritty and dark serial killer slasher horror film. I honestly think this is one of the most accurate portrayals to a serial killer in real life. Feels like a serial killer story that is so realistic, except we're seeing it from the serial killer's perspective and there's no heroes or losers. The losers are just all the victims. And the loser is obviously the killer as well, I guess. It's like we're experiencing a Netflix documentary murder story play out in real time before the killer got caught or had his conclusion. Almost feels like a giallo exploitive horror flick at times, especially with how the director tests the audience and pushes things to the limit. This is not your standard slasher film at all. It's a mommy issues having type of serial killer, and the first 45 to 60 minutes of the movie are just nothing but kills, and no proper structure of story. That is definitely one aspect of it not being ordinary. It executes the story in a unique way, and some may feel mixed about it, but I think that worked, and the film as a whole works for the vision they had in mind. And it is honestly kinda cool. And yet it's also such a sickening and disturbing and creepy film. So they did succeed at what they were trying to do still. It's honestly a mistake that I watched this movie at 4 a.m. because if you know how creepy that ending is, I was so unsettled. I literally heard some like doors opening or something, and I was like mostly home alone. I literally got so scared. I literally double locked like the main door of the house. Then I just literally ran upstairs. I was literally scared for my whole life. Besides that little horror story of mine, another aspect that I love and I am so obsessed with honestly has got to be once again the practical effects and makeup. Unbelievably cool. I'll always have respect and admiration for people who work in that department and actually execute their work in a really cool and unique way. And even if it's not unique, just the effort that they put in is just admirable and mostly amazing. But man, the stuff they were able to pull off in that department in this film turned out to be real gory and gruesome. It does not shy away. This is the second or third horror film this month that I had seen an exploding head practical effects. Beautiful. Overall, funny enough, stuff like movies like these are honestly what inspires me to make movies and to be a filmmaker. And yeah, my overall rating is a 7.5 out of 10. Weird, gritty, and so dark and disturbing, and it reminds me of Taxi Driver at times. 2007's Dead Silence. I like this a lot more than I expected. James Wan is an underrated master of horror. I recognize his talents all the way back in 2022 with his works in directing Saw, Malignant, Insidious, The Conjuring. That man has Sam Raimi levels of sauce in horror filmmaking, especially in this film. This film is decently scary, but doesn't hit the right spots to the point where when I'm watching this alone and in the dark, I'd feel like someone is behind me watching it with me, or just that general unsettling creepy vibe all in all, where someone's just gonna kill me behind my back. Am I the only one who feels that way? That's such an unusual analogy, but that's just the type of scares that I can get if I feel genuinely scared. I was unsettled, but I was mostly interested, and I like the whole idea of the film overall. And the whole filmmaking style, it's also very distinct to James Wan, whilst also being very reminiscent to Sam Raimi. The cinematography and the lighting was so good too. This was a really cool watch all in all. James knew what he was doing and the script was killer. The backstory and the lore is quite surprising and very well told. The plot twist at the end caught me by the most surprise. I honestly forgot who directed the movie because I was so mesmerized by everything I was watching. Because if you know James Wan, you would know how fire his plot twists can be. I thought this was gonna end in a normal yet horrific type of way. However, it just goes in the most like Saw-like type of plot twists in the most James Wan style possible. So cool and unpredictable, and I love that. Also, shout out to Billy the Puppet because he does make a small appearance in one scene of the film, and it's very brief where if you blink you'll miss it type of scene. And if you could see in my background, I have Billy the Puppet right there, and the other Billy the Puppet from Dead Silence. The funny thing is both of them are called Billy the Puppet. And the other funny thing is that I had the puppet from Dead Silence, but I never watched it back then. I just thought that it'd be a good horror collectible to have. But now that I watched Dead Silence, I appreciate it all the more. Overall, worth the watch. My overall rating is a 7.5 out of 10. Greatly shot, greatly written, and acted, and directed. All in all, great, but not amazing. Now this other one is a real short review because I did not like this movie. And that is 2005's House of Wax. A movie I'm convinced everyone is lying when they say they love it. This is almost entirely sauceless except for some decent CGI and effects. Other than that, genuinely a snooze fest, with some bad acting and some weird chemistry. No big review, I was just a little disappointed. This has an okay premise, terrible execution, but could have been so much better. My overall rating is a 4.5 out of 10. Okay, this other horror films is horror films plural because it's a franchise, and that is the Phantasm franchise. I had only watched the first movie back in 2023, and back then I did not see the vision. But now, I really do. And God, I was so wrong the first time I watched this movie. This is a near masterpiece of horror surreal cinema. This also feels like it's on the borders of being a cult classic and also just a straight up classic. I underappreciated this the first time I watched this. Like a fool. Phantasm is gnarly, surreal, and so uniquely eerie and chilling the whole way through. They nailed the atmosphere and vibe, especially for a late 70s horror movie. It's centered around two brothers and a creepy local mortuary in which they discover is as horrific and surreal as you can imagine. It's got a horror icon, the Tall Man, a legion of spooky hooded dwarf killers, and then on top of all of that, probably my favorite part of the film is the legendary flying drill ball. I was genuinely terrified at times all in all. This is honestly insane. I loved this and appreciated this so much more upon rewatch. This is way ahead of its time. The effects and practical effects, plus the unforgettable surreal horror and the ambition within it all. It is all too good and unique and has so much excellent effort that makes this film an underrated cornerstone in the horror genre to be ignored. The ending is the best route that they could have gone in. Absolute shocker and doesn't hold back. And it just perfectly makes sense. It's well written, smart, and symbolic, and I loved it all in all. There's also a pretty good Dune reference in one scene that I noticed as well. So overall, is it worth the watch? Hell yeah! Most especially if you're already a fan of surreal horror or general horror from the 80s or 70s or 90s. So much fascinating stuff at play in here to enjoy and appreciate and love. Horror filmmaking wise, this is honestly kind of groundbreaking. And my overall rating this time around is a 9 out of 10. Now, almost 10 years later, Phantasm 2 released, it was pretty solid too, but not as good as the first original movie. So yeah, Phantasm is back and it keeps getting more and more batshit crazy. Just the way I like my horror movie franchises. Even if it may lose some to most of the charm of the original film, and hell, by the end, even though this film existing sort of ruins that symbolic perfect ending to the first film, the ending to this film fixes that issue and makes it okay for this film to exist, and I love it for that. Now, after having seen the first Phantasm, I was in such a mood to binge all of the Phantasm movies, and especially having seen the second Phantasm movie, I was like, oh my god, I'm in love with this franchise. But yeah, so far from the first two movies, this franchise is honestly so criminally underrated and iconic in the horror world, even within the vein of cult classics. The uniquely chilling Phantasm franchise has not lost its touch in the sequel, and it continues to not hold back and have even more absurdity and high stakes cranked up by a lot. You can tell Don Coscarelli, as original as he can be with his story and filmmaking, he just has a lot of love and inspiration from Sam Raimi, and possibly the Evil Dead films as well. Hell, thank goodness for my eagle eye, I noticed an Easter egg in the crematorium scene where the ashes go into the bag. It was named Mr. Sam Raimi. If that's not a clue as to how much he loves the guy, I don't know what is. Either way, very cool Easter egg that I noticed. This film was a little weird to get into, and it for sure does lose some of the charm of the original film and doesn't have the exact surrealness to it, nor does it have the similar eerie vibe. Regardless, with what we got is still genuinely not bad, because then again it does have some writing issues, but fixes and redeems itself constantly. This is such a cool sequel at the end of the day. 3 times the flying drill ball equals 3 times the fun and the deadliness of it all. It really is much more batshit crazy in this film and has a lot more brilliantly done practical effects and general gore to adore as a horror fan. This has 3 times the flying drill balls, a lot more gore and genuine scares to me personally. Did I also forget to mention the ultra badass chainsaw fights that happen in this movie? And crazy weapon combos? Oh my god. That is how cool of a sequel this is. Overall, it is a little slow at times, but when it picks up, it is so fun and so insane. A real explosive and fun sequel at the end. It's got its issues, but it's good enough by the end to earn that 8 out of 10 rating. I will say though, story-wise, the love story did feel a little forced, but worked and was lovely to see. It was also a little odd to see the main character get recast, but then again the original actor, Michael Baldwin, does return in the sequels, and he's damn good in those sequels. Now, obviously, as you guessed it, on to Phantasm 3. Man, what a consistently good and fun franchise. I'm genuinely surprised at how good it actually is. Like, when it comes to the horror movie franchise topics or horror movies in general, no one ever brings up the Phantasm franchise. They only talk about Scream, Friday the 13th, or Halloween, or Nightmare on Elm Street, but the crazy thing is those franchises does have quite a few misses, and when they do miss the mark, it can turn out to be pretty bad. Like, even for me, I personally believe a lot of the movies from the Friday the 13th franchise are very bad, but that's a topic for another day. And I'm not saying Phantasm is better than all of them, but so far, from the first 3 movies, it is very consistently good, and it hasn't strayed away too much from the original, and it just keeps on getting more insane and fun. The third film goes deeper into the lore and the sci-fi aspects of the franchise, whilst also being able to maintain its surrealism and execute it in a unique way. They also continue to do the sequel storytelling style where every time there's a Phantasm movie sequel, it seamlessly starts where we left off, and it's honestly done pretty well. The only bad thing about when they did it this time around is how badly they wasted the character of Elizabeth in the opening scene, who was the love interest of Mike from the second movie. They really had something special together and a really special bond, not just romance-wise. The whole thing together could have been really interesting to explore more. Aside from that, this is quite of a cheesy sequel from the side characters, and even with Mike and Reggie, also stumbling upon new characters like Tim and Rocky, who do make the film all the more fun because of the group's whole dynamic together. They're all badass too and quite well written. I love the visuals and the cinematography of this film. They continue to let their visuals shine through and at the same time have good effects all around. It's so much fun how they have fully embraced the tall man's supernatural abilities and all of the surreal horror that's around and within him, which allowed him to be this somewhat cheesy Freddy Krueger-esque character, but he is arguably so much more scarier than Freddy Krueger, especially with how powerful he can be, not just character-wise, acting-wise as well. Like how he just screams like, that was a little impression of mine. Angus Scrimms's line deliveries are top notch and unmatched. Genuinely some good stuff. This is yet again another worthy sequel. I'm glad that they brought back Mike's brother Jody in a way that works in the film's world. And I'm even more glad to see Michael Baldwin back as Mike in this film, who was the original Mike in the first Phantasm film. The Mike who was in Phantasm 2 was not bad, but I prefer the original. He was much better, even when he's grown up. Overall, as cheesy as it was, from the character dynamics or from some of the writing and from some of the side characters acting as well, the emotions were still running higher than the first 2 movies, and this felt like a much deeper and layered film. They had some good emotions stirring around in the final act, as well as well put together high climactic moments, alongside insane kills and even more gnarly fights and action, and bloody good practical effects. Horror wise, it does continue to genuinely scare me, even if it's a little subtle, so yeah, it does still succeed as a horror movie. And my overall rating is a 7.5 out of 10. And now for Phantasm 4 Oblivion. This one is sadly the first miss of the Phantasm franchise. It does feel like a drag, and the storytelling in here is tiresome. I still enjoyed some aspects of the movie, but it was still such a hard watch, and it definitely has some pretty bad pacing issues. And at times it generally feels like nothing has happened for 85% of the movie. I was fully expecting an epic showdown once and for all between Mike versus the Tall Man, especially with that one scene of Mike learning he has similar powers to the Tall Man after what the Tall Man had done to him from the previous movie. If they explored that type of stuff deeper, that would have been so much better because it's so interesting and cool, and it could have been a much better payoff in the end. I did like the time travel and dimension hopping aspects of the film though, but even all of that could have been executed so much better, but it was still cool lore wise. We still got to learn much more about the Tall Man and his origins. This is a decent film, but as a horror film it did not scare me and did not feel as eerie as the previous films. This is easily the worst one of the franchise, and that doesn't say much because I still enjoy it. It's just that it's got its undeniable issues that do tend to get annoying and hard to ignore. It does have very dark moments, but even this time around with another absurd cliffhanger type of ending, it just had me like, it ends like that? While the previous endings were like, Yo, that is crazy. And they actually worked. Now on to some of the positive sides of what I enjoyed of the movie. I did dig the whole usage of using deleted scenes from the first movie and editing them in unique ways to fit the storytelling of this one and rework them as a sort of symbolic flashback type of scenes. Generally really cool stuff. I have never seen a filmmaker do that before. And it even makes you think if Don Coscarelli had planned the whole story ever since the first movie. The surrealism here is actually not bad and works for quite a bit. It's what elevates the creepiness of certain scenes too. Other than that, overall, this one missed the mark, unfortunately. And my overall rating is a 5.5 out of 10. To the fifth and final Phantasm film, Phantasm Ravager. Truly an underrated and overlooked horror franchise. Sure, this film does have its iffy CGI and some slight porno type of acting from the side characters, and is somewhat shot badly from the first half of the movie, but my goodness man, this is such a terrific hallucinatory roller coaster ride that feels like such a warm and epic hug after that previous film. It's got a neat ending and even more amazing world building. I love how they fully embraced the ambition of it all and went more epic and horrific than ever. This is gory, bloody, and gives us Phantasm fans everything we could have wanted. I mean, of course, a true sequel would have been less action oriented and would have gone back to its roots, because that is what true fans honestly want. However, I'm still really happy with what we got. I would even go as far as to say this was insanely cool. I'm glad I'm done with the Phantasm franchise. It generally became one of my favorite horror franchises and one of my favorite franchises overall. And yes, an 8 out of 10 is a kind of crazy rating for this movie, because I know a lot of people do feel kind of mixed on this movie, especially seeing as to how this is a higher rating than my rating for the third movie. But I guess this film was just too entertaining and I was shocked by too many aspects, including with how good the pacing is and how entertaining the whole thing is overall. The storytelling style and directing is so exhilarating, and this is such a fun Mad Max meets Phantasm-esque sequel. This is not the route that I would have gone in if I made the sequel, but it's cool, gruesome, and gives us a happy and absurd and a very open to interpretation type of ending as well. That also kind of feels open-ended, which I'm not too mad about. But yet again, there's also that after credits scene, which shows Rocky meeting Reggie in the car, which gives us fans the reunion that we all needed. And my overall rating is an 8 out of 10. Now that I'm done with the Phantasm franchise, on to House. Not the House that you're thinking of, House 1985. One of my favorite first watches probably of the entire year. What a delightful surprise. This is right down my alley. Plenty of Evil Dead 2 and Brain Dead vibes. It is so much fun and has got a good concept about a struggling divorced novelist who moves into his aunt's haunted house after she had killed herself. Within the midst of all of that, he moved in because he's trying to write a new book and wasn't ready to let go of the house because he had also lost his young son. It's gruesome and kind of dark, yet it is so lighthearted at times and is very genuinely funny. I had a good laugh many times watching this. The horror comedy writing in here is astounding. There's even some good surreal and supernatural aspects as well. During the entirety of October of my time watching horror movies, this is probably the most fun I had watching a horror movie. House, although it has the same name as the other more popular and beloved horror movie, is totally different and severely underrated. It's funny, silly, outlandish, and a very easy watch of a horror movie, especially because it's not that scary for beginners, yet at least it can still be pretty thrilling and intense as well. Mike Alberg is also an underappreciated cinematographer. This film and Reanimator is well shot. I'm also wearing a Reanimator shirt, as you can see. I'm gonna be reviewing that in this video too. Overall, I enjoyed and I was entertained all the way through. I was intrigued immediately, and my final rating is an 8 out of 10. A worthy watch. Now on to 1988's Brain Damage. I had no idea Frank Henenlotter directed this, but I just felt it within me that he did direct it, and I was right. I loved it. This had not only reignited my love for Frank Henenlotter and made me want to rewatch Basket Case and then go on to watch Frankenhooker for the first time. Spoiler alert, I did not watch Basket Case, but I did watch Frankenhooker, and that review will come in later. Funny enough, Dwayne Bradley from Basket Case, holding the basket case, canonically shows up as an official cameo in this film, in the subway scene. So that also at least confirms that Basket Case and Brain Damage are in the same universe. But I had watched Frankenhooker and I did not see any references or Easter eggs that would make me think that all three of these movies are connected. But holy moly, talk about an unofficial legendary trilogy. Basket Case, Brain Damage, and then Frankenhooker Frankenhooker? Crazy stuff. But now I'll only talk about Brain Damage. I'm in love with Henry Lotter's style. It's gory, horrifically grotesque, and has such a city vibe, which, as dark and bloody as the movie can get, there's such a weird mix of flat-out comedy and undertone comedy as well throughout the film, as much as this is a horror movie. I found it pretty funny, and generally it was a fun watch. One thing that I would say that makes this film so unique too is that it has got to be one of the most trippiest horror movies that I had ever seen, and you'll understand in a little bit. The plot goes like Brian suddenly gets attached by this creature created by this weird old couple that lives in the same apartment building, and that creature is called Elmer or Aylmer. He feeds off of brains and took Brian as a host, so things turn wild, and all hell breaks loose from then on, turning Brian's life spiraling downwards. So I guess kind of rereading the plot and remembering the movie, Elmer was basically like a parasite. I don't know how that went over my head. But regardless, it's brilliantly an anti-drug film as well, that shows it off in such a fun, dreadful experience of a trippy body horror film, and it really works. It's chaotically fun with a smart story and idea. The kills were so creative and surprising, and they generally had some really fascinating practical effects works that had me wondering, how did they do that? Elmer and Brian has got to be one of my favorite horror characters, and Elmer has got to be one of my favorite horror creatures as a whole. He has an actual personality and such a funny and interesting history. He's so much fun to watch and to listen to speak. He's honestly a perfectly created character. So oddly comedic, and makes the movie all the more fun and chaotic to watch, and elevates the pacing in every way. A ton of dark comedy at play, all of which worked and I enjoyed thoroughly. What can I say? That's just Henry Lotter's style and vibe. I'm so greatly entertained with all of that. Overall, truly an insane and darkly fun experience. If you've never seen Frank Henenlotter's horror films, just rip off the band-aid and do so. Start with Basket Case, and then this film, and then Frankenhooker. You're in for such a crazy and fun surprise. This was a hell of a time and experience, and my overall rating is an 8 out of 10. Time for Frankenhooker, baby. Yeah. Holy shit. I'm 100% a fan of Frank Henenlotter now. It does suck that his filmography is so small. This is surprisingly one of the smarter horror movies I had seen in recent times. It's obviously a play on Frankenstein, but all purely in Henenlotter's style. And with hookers. That does sound silly, and it is. That's part of what makes it so good. It serves as a satirical horror film that's got commentary on feminism and masculinity and gender roles, plus the objectification of women. It's all sort of layered within this horror comedy. It's wildly fun, ridiculously entertaining, and explosively gory and electric, plus uniquely intriguing, and is intentionally exploitative. It's all down my alley, and I loved it personally. Elizabeth is an absolute horror icon and an underrated queen. She is too good and funny. This has got to be my favorite Henenlotter film. The body horror is top notch and at his all-time best. I also love Henenlotter's usage of the setting of cities in his horror films. I feel like what Michael Mann does to the thriller and action genre while utilizing cities as the main setting is what Henenlotter does for the horror genre. The cities always feel so lively and looks like such eye candy. Really well shot. And again, I always bring up practical effects when I'm talking about 80s horror movies because it's hard not to be fascinated by it, and it's also hard not to praise it or enjoy. This film is surely no different. The amount of awesome and vile props and gore literally has me thinking at times like, what if I could get one of those screen used props? It would be insane to own and I would look like such a sickening freak. But it's still such a worthy screen used film memorabilia to own. Because I was thinking like, man, I could like own one and then put it like in my background or something. And then people would think it's weird, but I'd be like, no, it's actually from Frankenhooker. Overall, I enjoyed this and was entertained very much so. And I would watch it again. I loved everything that was good about it and more. Hell, even the poster for an 80s horror movie, this looks glorious. All in all, the movie is fun, insane, dark, sexy, and mostly comedic. What a shock fest. My overall rating is an 8 out of 10. I also love the movie and the poster so much to the point where I even ordered a t-shirt. Next up is the 1979's The Driller Killer. One of the more weirder watches. This is another trippy watch. It's an absurdly surreal exploitation fest of a realistic horror slasher serial killer film that's more like stuff like the movie Maniac, and yet also still feels so out of the ordinary. It's also so petrifyingly dreamlike, and has a real bleak and vicious look at the late 1970s New York. It's also another weird slasher because of its lack of suspense and intensity. It's just all in your face sometimes. You kind of just bask yourself in all of its absurdity and see how the painter, the main character, delves into madness. I guess these style of horror slasher films are meant to feel more realistic, and it worked. I do feel a little mixed about this genre of horror filmmaking, but I'm leaning more towards liking it. This is a bizarre film, and it's also got some decently impressive blood work and use of practical effects. Nothing way too shocking filmmaking wise, but good stuff. This does make me want to check out more of Abel Ferrara's work and get into the guy. In all of the ways to explain the simplicity of the plot, you can say this is a real straightforward serial killer slasher horror film about a painter who lives with two female roommates, and he slowly goes insane while struggling to pay the bills. So he starts getting led into madness, then he gets into killing people with a drill. Since it's one of those slashers where there's no heroes and we just sort of follow the killer, it just works for what it is, honestly, and you have to enjoy it for what it is. It's one of those movies where the more times I think about it, I like it. Overall, this is a decently good watch, especially if you don't really have any other horror movie to pick. This is an easy watch too, but it's not something I would instantly recommend to all of my friends. My overall rating is a 7.5 out of 10. This next one I did feel quite iffy on, and that is Night of the Demons, released in 1988. For the concept this movie has, they could have executed so much stuff a lot better. This is just and okay, and honestly felt like such a drag and didn't work too much for me. The final scene was pretty rad though. I honestly don't have that much other thoughts. I guess it does have a good set design, but besides that, the first act was solid, but you can tell that they were struggling with the script and they didn't really know where they were going. Overall, as simple as I can say it, I was hoping to like it a lot more, and my final rating is a 5.5 out of 10. This didn't suck entirely, it just felt exhausting to watch, and they just didn't have the right ingredients in the mix, or the sauce as they may say, to make it great. Now onto another film that was released in the same year, Maniac Cop. What more can you ask for from this absolutely awesome cult classic of a horror movie? Bruce Campbell, he's in it, gripping intensity all the way through, and cool kills. You got that? It felt like such a relief finishing this movie because it was so goddamn intense 90% of the movie. Personally, to me, Bruce Campbell is a top 10 favorite actor of mine, and he elevates everything that he's in. And I certainly loved seeing him here. He really killed it with the script that was given to him. This is a conspiracy-oriented mystery slasher horror film centered around cops, about a sickening titan of a serial killer dressing up as a cop and murdering innocents left and right. It's brutal and intense, and of course, since it's an 80s horror movie, especially one centered around cops, there is so much annoying and incompetent cops literally everywhere. That had to have been the worst part of the movie though. I mean, at times there does have some unique executions and writing in ways you wouldn't expect, but man, you gotta give us, especially the audience, some leeway and some satisfaction in certain moments, because we have to suffer through a bunch of tough shit that we have to witness on screen until we get some satisfaction, because it's so intense and a lot of incompetent cops are everywhere. This is a decently above average, well-made cult classic. The biggest positive about this movie was that not only was Bruce Campbell in this movie, and he was excellent as well, we also got a freaking Sam Raimi cameo. Us Bruce and Sam fans are eating good watching this movie. Another good and interesting way to describe this movie is this is like The Departed meets LA Confidential, but make it a horror slasher. Overall, there's some okay to good kills, but besides that, it's an interesting film and can keep you on the edge of your seat, whilst that can also get under your skin and annoy you, unfortunately. And my final rating for this is a 7 out of 10. Time for the Reanimator films, baby. Here we go! This is another film where I had only watched the first movie of the franchise, but the first time I had watched Reanimator was back in 2022, and man, I don't know why I didn't watch the sequels. Because after watching this, my reaction to that ending, I was like, wow! It ends like that? Because how did I watch that ending in 2022 and not go on to immediately watch the sequels? This is truly one hell of a rad cult classic madhouse of a horror movie, and thankfully the movie does live up to my old love of the movie, and the rewatch did it so much justice. This is a masterclass in not only usage of excellent lighting and practical effects, but also in understanding how to make a unique zombie horror film, with passion oozing through everywhere, including blood, and care to the story and attention to filmmaking detail too. This is some amazing stuff, man. Really unlike anything you've ever seen before. Such an interestingly dark ride of a horror comedy. You've got absolute terror and mayhem, all centered around insane scientists morgues, and hospitals. It's all so seriously good, and they know how to balance it all out. And shout out to that score, man. Phenomenal. Yes, you can criticize Richard Band for somewhat plagiarizing the Psycho theme, but I personally see it as a fresh remix. All in Reanimator style. I guess you could say Richard reanimated an old style. But and this was the result of that. I enjoyed so much, and it elevates the movie in plenty of ways. Even the opening title sequence, that has got to be my personal favorite opening title sequence out of any horror movie ever. Overall, this was a much needed rewatch, beautiful 4K restoration. I'm even considering getting the physical media of this film. From the always amazing Arrow video, chaotic and cartoonish horror film all in all, and knows how to push the limits and keep up the intensity and grimness of it all the way through. And honestly, you know what, I'm gonna stick with my original rating, and I'm gonna stick with the 10 out of 10. And that is my final rating. It's just a flat out flawless horror cult classic. I also rewatched it because I wanted to watch the sequels, and I did. So Bride of Reanimator, I watched it. All I got to say is freaky. This is certainly not as good as the first film, but my goodness, they didn't lose their touch for a ton of aspects. And the movie still has so much of its charm and magic that the first film has. This just isn't as good as the first film for a few reasons, like the writing issues that personally annoyed me. This is also cheesier, which could be seen as a good thing, but they didn't know how to balance it out at times. The acting was also kinda bad. Other than that, this was really not that bad of a watch or a sequel all in all. It does get more cartoonish, as well as even more heavily disastrous, plus was able to maintain being wildly gory and bloody whilst ranking it up to an 11. It's insane and kind of symbolic also, and sort of heavy at times, but mostly enjoyable. The cop character was a little annoying, and I also hated that they brought back Dr. Hill. But yeah, all in all, this was still a good sequel and was quite fun. Great executions for the story and plot. The pacing could have been a little bit better, because man, the suspense really kills me sometimes. The main poster for this film is such a downgrade, unfortunately, and looks very odd and off and doesn't fit the vibe or the setting of the movie at all. Overall, I liked it. It's not the best, and it certainly could have been a lot better, but there's still a lot of impressive and enjoyable aspects all around. So my final rating is a 7 out of 10. Now on to Beyond Reanimator. Yeah, no. This is really bad. Generally, what the actual hell is this? It should be considered blasphemous for this shit show to even exist. This is disgusting, and not only even in the terms of horror. So much weird and obvious sexual innuendos, even in scenes that are not meant to be sexual. Like the first time you see the nurse character and you see how she acts and you see how she's dressed, you just know that she'll end up nude. And not even in a good way. This legit feels like the director's own creepy sexual fantasies projected onto the film and script. This is unbelievably cringe and unwatchable. Drags a lot as well. Camera work wise, this is terribly shot. At one point, they even pathetically try to recreate that one iconic shot from The Exorcist, and yeah, it falls flat terribly. This stripped away all of the things that made the first two movies great, and that is still the tip of the iceberg of what's wrong with this movie. They even wasted previous characters. Like, where's Dan? Dan and Herbert worked so well together. I already hated Herbert West from the ongoing of the second half of the second movie, and a little bit of a hot take, but they should have just killed him off in the second movie. Once he started having this weird god complex, he became real annoying and cringe, especially in this movie. He feels like such a god-awful mix of Dexter, The Good Doctor, and House, all in one. And if that doesn't sound like an insufferable mix, I don't know what does. Performance-wise, there's nothing much to say. It's a simply horribly acted film. If you want to talk about porno acting, this is the film. So bad. Okay, one of the better aspects of the film, I'll say, is the practical effects. They were good, and there weren't that much of an issue up until this one point. There's a literal moment where there's a dead guy being puppeteered, and you can literally see the strings being played from above. And that was not even intentional or part of the story. You can see that was so clearly from behind the scenes. Overall, a pointless and weird sequel and final film in the trilogy. They went horrendously downhill after the second movie, and my final rating is a 2 or a 3 out of 10. I gotta say, that final scene sucks. They try to pander to fans by showing Herbert going back to the original hospital from the first two films, but it just doesn't make sense. He's a convicted criminal who escaped from prison. Oh my god. It is so forced. That's one part of the film that adds on to all the nonsensical bullshit this film has. Now on to an even better trilogy, the Evil Dead trilogy. I love this trilogy so much. I rewatched it quite a few times, and Evil Dead 2 is my all-time favorite horror movie. So now on to the Evil Dead. This is genuinely phenomenal. Every time the topic of Evil Dead comes up, or in general anytime I think of Evil Dead, I just think about how many times I have seen Evil Dead 2 and how I am rightfully so obsessed with that movie. And it is without a doubt a massive upgrade from the first movie, but my goodness man, even though I pushed this movie away so many times and I rewatched Evil Dead 2 a lot more, this film is a genuine horror goldmine and a masterpiece. Sam Raimi only brings the real deal around these parts and definitely changed the game in the horror genre. You can see his influence from this film and from Evil Dead 2 ooze into a bunch of horror movies from around that time, and especially in horror movies from nowadays too. The impact and influence is that strong. The storytelling and camera work in this film is top tier and unmatched. The story is unique, the camera work is utterly immersive, and works so well for it being the first film. It still has so much to adore within the filmmaking aspects. It's honestly insane how they were able to pull off so much things that they did in here. So freaking cool, and lands on its feet each time. This film is also the birth of the absolute horror icon and legend, Ash Williams. I love him so much even in the first movie. He has so much more character and character growth and more of a personality, and he's generally more hesitant than he is in Evil Dead 2. And I love that because we see him go through so much horrific and traumatic events that happened with him and his girlfriend and his friends. And then he turned out to be this fearsome, stubborn, lovable, emotional hero we had grown to love and enjoy and see more of in Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness and so on and so forth. Overall, I can see myself rewatching this even more now, and yeah, this was definitely a much needed rewatch. One aspect I will say is, I think one part which puts me away so much from rewatching this movie is the tree scene. If you watch the movie, you'll know what I'm talking about, and yeah, I do not like that scene. But all in all, besides the tree scene, this movie is still a 10 out of 10 regardless. I'm not even being biased. It is genuinely a 10 out of 10. Now on to the big guns. Evil Dead 2. It's bizarre, wildly fun, and ridiculously horrific. Truly an endlessly entertaining, bloody good time of a masterpiece of a sequel. Better than the first film in every single possible way. It's silly, cartoonish, darkly comedic, and it is such a cornerstone in the horror world, where it defined horror and horror comedies. And it is generally so iconic for all that it is. Absolutely legendary horror film. My personal favorite horror movie of all time. And one that I can watch any day and any time and never get sick of it. It's shocking, funny, extremely well made for its time, and most importantly, heavily badass, and has one of the most insane endings, and generally has probably the most insane lore in horror movie history too. This also really solidified the badass horror legend that is Ash Williams. Overall, this still is and always will be a 10 out of 10. Now, on to the third and final film of the Evil Dead trilogy, Army of Darkness. No matter how many times I rewatch this, my rating always stays the same. This one is full throttle Sam Raimi cartoonish batshit crazy style, and you can see his love for the Three Stooges-esque comedy style really shined from within here. And I loved all of that. It's a more adventurous, epic horror film. It works for what it is, but I do wish they stuck with a more linear storytelling and didn't have to do a new recap in the beginning of the film, recapping the events of Evil Dead 2 in a more PG way. Some stuff like that and other aspects don't work for me and didn't land too well, but for the stuff that did land and worked for me, I really enjoyed. And I loved seeing Ash Williams' true bravery and badass character traits really shine at its best from within here. Overall, this is a 6.5 out of 10. This could have been so much better, even if they stuck with the Three Stooges type of cartoonish style humor and general cartoonish style overall. They could have still utilized what made The Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 great, and used it in here. But I still love the trilogy. So legendary in all cases. Now on to the final film, The Poughkeepsie Tapes. The final and 31st horror movie in October. Boy, this was exhausting to film. So here we go. This is not that good. It's a decently made mockumentary horror film and is quite disturbing. It also feels like a more true documentary that you would see on Netflix. And because of that nature, it wasn't too interesting because it legit feels like it's a real documentary that's edited and everything, and they got interviews and it feels like a real life documentary. And because of that nature and that whole aspect, I got a little too bored. Now the real deal mockumentary horror films that I really enjoy are the Creep films and Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. Those ones are genuinely terrific and scary, plus they are really well made and actually entertaining. This one was just not that good. I mean, yes, it is a sort of parody horror documentary of sorts, and not even a parody in a comedy way, just a parody in general, from what I felt like it was. And from all that it is, and from all the way I described it, it just isn't gripping. That one plot twist was smart though. Overall, they could have gone through so much different routes and made this a lot more cooler. I do feel like if they made this today, with someone like David Fincher and the style of Mindhunter and stuff like that, this could have been so much cooler. But yeah, this sucked. And for the last film of Halloween, I kinda regret picking this film, and I did kind of had a feeling that this would suck. My final rating is a 3 out of 10. So please guys, if you enjoyed, I'm not even begging, like I'm literally exhausted. This was such a tiresome time filming this video on everything. Yeah, I can't even speak anymore. I had to refilm so many times and everything. Such a long mega video of a mega reviewing all of these movies. So if you enjoyed and you reached till the end, be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed, and comment down below if you'll watch any of these horror movies, and if you have watched any of them, what did you think of them? And you can check out my other content. I don't only do content about horror movies, I do other stuff as well, which is pretty enjoyable in my opinion, and also do some cool interviews here and there. And yeah, enjoy, and be sure to share this video with your friends or family if they enjoy horror movies as well. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.